Hello, I'm Matt Galloway, and this is The Current Podcast.
After months of back and forth steps forward and backwards, it is a threat the U.S. president does seem to be following through with. Donald Trump is hiking tariffs on more than 60 countries, including Canada. Trump has signed an executive order that increased a tariff on Canadian goods to 35% as of midnight. That's a boost from the 25% set in March. But it's only for goods that don't comply with the Canada-U.S.-Mexico Trade Agreement, or CUSMA. In a statement, Trump blamed Canada for failing to cooperate on stopping fentanyl from crossing the border and cited Canada's decision to retaliate against previous tariffs. Prime Minister Mark Carney called the decision disappointing, but vowed to protect Canadian jobs. So, where does this leave Canada? Goldy Hyder is the president and CEO of the Business Council of Canada. Good morning.
Good morning, Catherine. Good to be with you.
Good to have you on to give us some perspective on this, Goldy. So 35%, but only on non-CUSMA compliant goods. And I think a lot of Canadians will have learned that now we're up to somewhere around 90% of goods that are actually CUSMA compliant. So the big question we're left with this morning is, how bad is this?
Well, look, we're very, very lucky to have the USMCA because it is what is saving us and our economy today. It is encouraging to see that those companies that, were participating under the USMCA but not ever making themselves compliant are doing so. That is in everybody's interest that happen because it blunts the impact of what was announced yesterday and came into effect today.
So big picture then, how are you feeling this morning? I mean, you're noting that this is not as bad as it might otherwise have been if we didn't have this trade deal, but how bad is it really?
Well, look, I'm of two minds. First of all, let me just say, the empathy and that I feel for this government. There is no playbook for what is taking place. I understand their frustrations. I've heard their frustrations, particularly when it comes to the notion of these particular tariffs taking place because of the fentanyl. We know the fentanyl data. We know the response from the government has been robust. We know the investments that are being made, and we know the efforts that have been made to break up, fentanyl labs and so forth. So I can totally understand why they would be like, what else do we need to be doing here to avoiding this? But I think it speaks to a broader issue. And I was in Washington this week meeting with the United States Trade Representative as well as the number of senators, close to the president and others who work for us there. And what I came away with is there seems to be a disconnect here. There seems to be a disconnect with how Canada has been approaching this, which is perhaps under what we would call, if these were normal times category, here's how you would go about it. But Catherine, we're not in normal times. This is not Ronald Reagan or Bill Clinton on the other side. And I think we've been trying to deal with things in an orderly fashion. Let's talk about the tariff, and then we'll pivot to the trade. What we got coming out of this week is it's all bunched together. Everything is bunched together here. And so this is a moment where if I were in the government, I would take this long weekend and I would reassess my entire strategy about where I am and what I need to do to get to a better place.
Is there one takeaway, one message you would have for the Canadian government about what they should be doing that they're not right now?
Well, the funniest thing I heard was an American saying, Canadians are playing chess. The problem is there's nobody on their side playing with them. And so maybe this isn't a game of chess, maybe it is a game of cards. And if it is, I tell you, Canada has a lot of cards. There should be no doubt about that. But I will say the other thing is this is not a surprise. This president is about relationships, and the number of times Americans with good intentions who cherish our relationship, want to see it in a better place, have said, just pick up the phone and call them. And I think our prime minister needs to do a little bit more of that from time to time and keep them close, if I can say that.
So if we look at the fact that some countries have had success in reaching deals, we'll call them that, although I think there are many questions about the fact that there doesn't seem to be a lot of paper to go along with these deals, and that the deals do still require some level of tariffs. But you look at the UK, Japan, all of the EU. Why do you think they were able to reach deals with Donald Trump when Canada hasn't been?
Well, as I said, I think there is a question as to whether we continue to believe that we're in normal times where we can talk about trade without tariffs, or whether we can, talk about the importance of compliance with agreements that we have that Donald Trump created himself. These are not normal times, and this is not a normal situation. And I think the fact that a lot of people chastised the United Kingdom for getting in early at 10%, there's a lot of countries that would trade places with them today. So it was a calculated risk on their part. It may have paid off. EU clearly blinked, and Japan Japan has done similarly. There's a lot of uncertainty about what really has been agreed to or not agreed to. And so I'm more in the camp of buy time to the extent that Mexico was able to do so yesterday. You make the notion, you made you alluded to a deal versus, the agreements. Mm-hmm. There is a difference. These single pieces of paper have no standing in law. They have no substance to them. And so obviously we're going to have an agreement. And that's why we've been putting the emphasis on the off-ramp is the review and renewal of the USMCA. That is what is going to allow Canada privileged access, maintain that access, and allow our economy to be, in a much more stable, prosperous position than it currently is.
I'll call it the politics of this, but maybe it's more about the personal dynamics. I don't know, are quite interesting. I mean, we saw Mark Carney go to the White House and have what seemed like a very positive meeting with Donald Trump. But then you can see that there are also moments where there seems to be some irritation with Canada. And I think in one spot where we saw that highlighted was yesterday when U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick was speaking to Fox News, and he was speaking about Canada. Here is some of what he said.
The Canadians put out, we're going to recognize the Palestinian state. Come on, don't be so tone deaf. The president is totally into trying to get peace in Gaza, and you're throwing your hat in the ring from Canada? Come on. 2 countries on the whole world retaliated against the United States of America tariffs. China, which we all know, and Canada. I just don't see the president stepping off the gas.
So, Goldy, is this just playing cards, playing poker, like you said a minute ago, or is Howard Lutnick correctly identifying some irritants?
Well, I'll go with more what the president had to say, which is, he had a point of view on Palestine. We respectfully, disagree. And the fact is, Mexico has the same position that Canada did. So I feel that is an overrated or overstated point. He made it fairly clear that this has much more to do with the fentanyl issues and so forth. And as far as, the retaliation goes, we took a strategy, and I believe that we need to reassess it. There is an opportunity here to take this long weekend and the time ahead to say what we've been doing, has it worked? And if not, isn't that the definition of insanity if we keep doing it? So let's put it all on the table privately inside Canada, have those discussions with our political leaders and our business leaders and say, where are we? As I said, we have cards to play. Canadian pension plans, Canadian businesses and so forth continue to invest and expand their operations in the United States because it is a vibrant G1 economy and we have the benefit of the USMCA. I do think we need to hear the Americans on the trade irritants. And the reality is Canada has trade irritants with the United States as well. I mean, we keep winning disputes that don't get honored. Mexico has their own issues. Our view is the best way to bring some coherence to where we are is to put the trade negotiators in the room in the process of reviewing and renewing the USMCA and preparing for that to give markets and to give businesses an indication that normal times do lie ahead and that we will actually get to a place where there will be an agreement and not just a piece of paper that's being waved on camera.
But that USMCA renewal process is likely to start in the fall. In the meantime, I'd like to better understand what you're saying about this moment and retaliation. You're saying Canada has cards it can still play, although the ones I heard you pointing to there, pension fund investments, they aren't things like counter tariffs. Do you think in this moment where there is a failure to get a deal that Canada should consider a higher level of counter tariffs right now, knowing that the existing counter tariffs have irritated the Americans?
Well, look, Catherine, let's separate the emotion of that question versus the rational part of that question. I'm pleased, actually, the Prime Minister said, even before the election in London, where he was asked, do you believe we can continue to do dollar for dollar tariffs with the United States of America? And his response was, there are limits. And he is right about that. We are, they are 10x of our economy, and they're not feeling these tariffs. I mean, they may be feeling some of the brunt of the travel or maybe some of the liquor being taken off the shelves or whatever. But in the long run, it's not having the impact that it would. But if you were to counter tariff, what you're saying is we're arguing that tariffs are bad for another country, but we're going to put them on our own people who are in a very fragile economy. We heard the Bank of Canada this week about the various scenarios that could unfold. imposing tariffs on Canadians right now would be inflationary here in Canada and could have a negative kickback. So it might make you feel good. It might make us all feel good. But we need to think through about how we're going to actually get through all this noise and get to a better place with our relationship with the United States and charting a course forward for that review and renewal so that we can bring stability for markets and for capital to respond positively.
Just in closing, in the past, when we've talked about cards that Canada can play, the conversation has been around some things that also evoke a lot of emotion. So I'm thinking about Canadian energy, the U.S. dependence on that. You can look at what Doug Ford attempted to do at one point by saying basically he was going to yank Ontario's energy for some U.S. states. We know Danielle Smith hasn't responded particularly well many months ago when there was talk of perhaps counter tariffs on oil coming out of Alberta. Should Canadian energy be one of the cards at play here?
Well, look, if you look at what the EU has just done with the United States, it's committed to buying, its energy, more and more of its energy from the United States. That energy will be supplied in many parts from Canada, but it's not something that you play Russian roulette with when you're talking about the economy of an entire province. And so, no, I don't think we should be doing that. I think what we should be doing is reminding our allies and our friends the importance of Canadian energy, Canadian food, Canadian minerals, right across this country. Canadian businesses have the United States in many ways as their number one customer and their number one partner. And so while we're frustrated with the way with which we're being treated, the reality is we have an opportunity to ensure that we can strengthen our economy with not only the United States, but I really think, Catherine, the conversation that Canadians have been having about how to ensure that we also have a U.S. plus strategy. How do we diversify? How do we build that infrastructure will go a long way in strengthening our hand inside North America, but also outside North America. And that's where we're hopeful that all the good intentions and the ambition translates into actual actions, because in the meantime, the United States is a very competitive place to continue to invest. And that will continue to happen if we don't make ourselves even stronger and more competitive.
Okay. Really appreciate your insights today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. All the best.
Goldy Hyder is the president and CEO of the Business Council of Canada. Well, now let's zoom out and look at the bigger international picture here. Kenneth Rogoff is a professor of economics at Harvard University and a former chief economist of the International Monetary Fund. His latest book is Our Dollar, Your Problem, an insider's view of 7 turbulent decades of global finance and the road ahead. Good morning.
Good morning.
How big a shift in the global economy does this moment mark, with Donald Trump slapping tariffs on upwards of 60 countries?
Well, I think it's the biggest thing maybe since Nixon went off the gold standard in 1971. It's incredibly disruptive. This is certainly an inflection point. And the thing is, it's not just about tariffs. It's about the whole relationship of the United States with the world. It's incredibly disruptive. I was listening to your previous guest who said a lot of great things about getting to a better place. Donald Trump is a very mercurial personality. Is there a deal to be had? Will you reach some deal where, let's say it's 15% on the goods outside the U.S., Mexico, Canada free trade agreement? You think he's just going to go to sleep? He loves this. Everyone's, being sycophantic to him. He'll get upset about, the Palestinian issue came up or something else. I don't think this is going to stop. I think at best you're going to get a ceasefire.
When I listened to our previous guest, Goldy Hyder, talk about the damage that further counter tariffs could do, I found myself wondering, has Donald Trump won? What do you think?
Well, for the moment, absolutely and totally, he has achieved his vision. I don't think it's a win for the American people. I think it's going to lead to higher prices, more mediocre goods. We're going to have less efficiency, slower growth. We are, as the previous guest said, very big. We only import 11% or something of our consumption, so we don't feel it the way other countries would feel it. But, it's certainly not a good thing. By the way, this may all disappear because the courts are really seeming to lean against him. We saw that just the other day. He's going to lose now, the Court of Appeals. Now, he's not going to lose. He's going to get slaughtered on this tariff issue. They clearly think this is ridiculous, that Congress has the right to set taxes, and this is a tax. And if he does, he's going to go to the Supreme Court. It's going to be very tough for them to overrule it. So there's so much uncertainty ahead, also in how to play this. But tariffs are worse for the country that puts them on than they are for the trading partner. So, I think that's the first point.
Well, and in that regard, Mark Carney at one point referred to what the U.S. was doing with retaliatory tariffs as an act of economic self-harm. Why do you think Donald Trump has been able to keep pursuing this agenda despite the fact that it ought to be causing so much damage to the U.S. economy?
Tariffs are very popular. They're easy to explain. Why don't we have tariffs, protect American jobs? My late mother is a brilliant woman. She knew I was an economist. We would have debates about tariffs, and I could never convince her that they were a bad idea. I don't think I won any of the debates. And it's very popular. Historically, the public in the United States has always liked tariffs. The executive, the president, has been the one, that's tried to keep them down. In fact, it's been an incredible achievement around the world that we took the tariffs, which are going to be about where they are now in the United States, over 15%. It's where they were around the end of World War II, and we gradually brought them down. It wasn't easy for anybody. So I think one of the ways in which it's smart not to slap on the counter tariffs is that try taking them off. If you want to get an agreement later, then not only do you have to convince the United States, you have to convince the various industries that it benefited.
How much of this is about Donald Trump finding revenue for the U.S. economy? Is this not, in a way, just a sort of consumption tax on Americans that they don't see in the same way?
It's true. That's a good point. It isn't a consumption tax which would cover everything and not create these distortions that this is going to create. But all taxes have a negative effect. You need the money. You have to provide for things. All taxes have a negative effect. In principle, if he's raising revenue from this, it's significant, a few $100 billion. The United States is a $30 trillion economy, 1% of GDP, 1% of our income. And, you can lower taxes elsewhere. He sure lowered taxes elsewhere already. He lowered them a lot. But yeah, it's not the end of the world for the United States, but it's a big step in the wrong direction. Mark Carney's exactly right. It's an act of self-harm. And, oh boy, the possibilities for corruption that this has, that's part of the reason countries don't like tariffs. In many countries where tariffs are higher, like in India or Brazil, they don't let anyone be in charge of customs for too long because they'd make too much money. They keep rotating them in and out.
Fascinating. For so long, Canadians enjoyed this privileged access to the U.S. market. In closing, I wonder, is this new era of protectionism and uncertainty just something we are going to have to get used to?
Well, Canadians still have privileged access. 90% of your goods are not subject to any tax. So in a way, this puts you way ahead of everybody else, right? Your average tax, I read, is going to be about 6%. It's below the UK's, it's below everyone's. So in a way, Canada, wins. You're still in the free trade agreement now. It's getting renegotiated. I don't know what he's going to ask for in the fall.
I guess it's the uncertainty part of it, though, the roller coaster that Canadians feel that we are on.
Welcome to the world of Donald Trump. I teach at Harvard University. I don't want to get into that, but it's just in every aspect of American life. Again, he's this mercurial personality. I don't think he's going to settle down. We're only 6 months in, or, a little more than 6 months in. There's 3.5 years to go. So we're in this very volatile period. There's no question about it, where he believes that he escaped death, in order to put tariffs on the world, and that's what he's going to do.
And here we are. Listen, it was excellent to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Kenneth Rogoff is a professor of economics at Harvard University and the former chief economist of the International Monetary Fund.
You've been listening to The Current Podcast. My name is Matt Galloway. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon.